right, we're going to talk a little bit more about cognitive development of children as it relates to sports now. There's four main issues that we're going to talk about here. First of all, we'll talk about concentration. We'll talk about children's ability to process information. Then we'll talk about children and how they learn how to distinguish between effort and ability. And then finally, we'll talk about the development of competence. Talk a little bit more about concentration. And anyone who's had time working with younger children understands that concentration can definitely be somewhat of an issue. And I always like to think, when I was coaching, I often said that children's attention span is their age in seconds. So if you're working with 8-year-olds, you've got about 8 seconds to hold their attention. Now that's not a very scientific estimate. That's more of a coaching rule of thumb, but I think it actually held quite well. So I often tried to make my instructions very quick and very to the point. Children are often distracted by small little things, so you often have to take that into consideration when you configure the environment that you're coaching within. Also, children have, compared to adults, children do not have the information processing ability that a fully grown adult has. So oftentimes that can mean that children take adults' feedback and advice at face value. But I think in general what this means from a coaching standpoint is that the information that you provide to a child should be simple and should not leave a lot of room for interpretation. Your feedback should be clear and the instructions should be very precise, very short. So we'll talk a little bit more about how children learn how to distinguish effort from ability. Children are not always able to tell the primary cause for a successful outcome in sport. So if you were to take the example of throwing a ball, a child could not tell you, a young child I should say, around the ages of 4 or 5, would not be able to tell you if a person was able to throw that ball because they had a high level of skill or ability, or if they were able to do that because they tried hard. In fact, they're really unable to tell the difference between skill or hard work, effort. As children grow and they learn a little bit more about sport, as they develop cognitively, then they start to believe that effort is the primary cause of a given outcome. So if you're able to throw that ball very far, that's because you tried hard. That would be the cause of the outcome. Again, as children develop even further, though, they do start to realize that some children are more skilled than other children. So if you were to see, for example, 2 children throwing a ball, and one children didn't appear to be trying, but threw the ball further than the child who appeared to be trying to throw the ball very far, the child's explanation for that outcome would be that, well, one person has more skill than the other, but that doesn't always mean that you'll be successful. So children generally believe that that hard work or effort can still be a primary cause of success. But finally, children arrive at an understanding of ability as sort of capacity, and that everybody has a different capacity or a different amount of skill that they can have in a given activity. And they learn that trying hard will only get you so far. Now, that's not to say that trying hard has no place, but they do understand that the two different concepts of ability or skill or capacity, or however you want to define it, and effort or hard work, those are 2 different concepts, and they don't always lead to successful outcomes just because you try hard. Skill definitely has a factor. Okay, so finally I want to talk about competence. And competence, in a nutshell, is your ability to perform a skill well. And again, we see a difference between younger children. Specifically, we're going to be talking about young children ages 3 to 6 and older children between the ages of 7 and 12. Young children typically define their competence in a sport intrinsically, so in their own personal meetings. So for example, I'm a good athlete because I can jump over the creek in my backyard. Oftentimes adult feedback is really helpful in a child's belief that they're competent in skill, such as my gym teacher told me that I threw the ball very well. That means to a young child that they are competent in that skill. And again, as we saw earlier, at this age, they really aren't able to tell the difference between hard work and ability in its ability to predict success at a given sport. So what does this mean for you as a coach? If you're working with children of this age, first of all, you want to provide what we call multiple opportunities for mastery. So, for instance, if you are running a practice, you would want to provide several different aspects of the practice. You might have several different drills you're running in a practice, and all of these drills could give every child on your team the opportunity to feel that they were good at something. So if you're running basketball practice, it might not be all shooting, but it might be a mix of shooting and dribbling. It might be some running. You might even set up something a little bit crazy for conditioning, like a little obstacle course. So maybe you have a child who isn't very good at shooting or handling the ball, but maybe they're pretty good at running and climbing on things. So, and they're getting their conditioning. So that way they're also feeling competent, like they're able to do something. Another thing is to provide positive but contingent feedback. And contingent feedback, for instance, if you were a parent or a coach, or again, imagine if you were a parent and your child came home from school, your kindergartner, and said, I did 15 sit-ups today in gym class. You would want to say, great, you must have worked really hard to achieve that, as opposed to saying something like, oh, how many did the other kids do? Or, oh, good job, Bobby. That way, the idea is that the feedback is trying to link effort to achievement. In older children, children between the ages of 7 and 12, competence or perceptions of competence, first of all, they become more accurate. So as a child becomes smarter and they are becoming more observant, they have a much better sense of how good they are at something because they have a better idea of mostly how good other athletes or other peers are at a given skill. And at this age, competence becomes a lot more peer-based, social normed in a sense. So if you're an 8-year-old kid, you become a lot more aware of, for instance, if say you're an 8-year-old swimmer, you're a lot more aware of how good the other swimmers on your team are, how fast they are. Whereas a 5-year-old kid isn't really aware of that. Also, coach feedback becomes a lot more important at this age, and actually parent feedback becomes a little less important at this age than coach feedback. So again, here the implications for coaches would be that non-contingent feedback can be harmful. And what we mean by non-contingent feedback is, say for example, you're running soccer practice and little Herbie is not doing very well in his drills, and your feedback to little Herbie is, good job, Herbie, but Herbie's quite aware that he's the slowest person dribbling the ball around the series of cones, and he's kicked the ball outside of the lines 10 times. He's had to retrieve his ball. He's way behind. And at that point, saying good job is clearly not contingent on him doing the task successfully. So Herbie may start to question, he might ask, for instance, is this as good as a coach thinks I actually can do this? Because this is pretty bad. Or he might just think coach is just patronizing me and trying to make me feel better. So non-contingent feedback at this point can be pretty harmful. You want to make your feedback more specific. And this can be tough sometimes when you have a kid who isn't doing very well, with a drill, but you have to try to find a positive, so something better than they did the last time. So sure, you dribbled outside of the line 10 times, but last time you did it 12, so you're showing improvement, or you're keeping the ball closer to your feet instead of taking bigger kicks. So there's an improvement. You look better than you did on Monday. Good job. Keep up. Keep trying. Keep up the good work. The other thing is, as a coach, you want to try to emphasize self-improvement. And this can be tough because you're talking about having a large team of maybe 20 players. It's tough to set individual goals. But oftentimes, you can do this through statistics. So if you're coaching a baseball team, for instance, you might be able to keep statistics from one game to the next. Are you getting more hits? Are you getting on base more often? Or it might be something like, are you getting more steals in basketball? Are you making more shots? Are you making more assists? Trying to have individual goals that emphasize self-improvement are a good thing to keep kids focused on their own improvement, as opposed to focusing on judging how good they are based on how good their peers are or how they fit in relation to their peers. So it keeps a focus on the self as opposed to outward on other people. So that is the overview for cognitive development as it relates to sport in childhood, and that is the larger lecture on growth, development, and sport for Principles of Coaching 2.